In the mid-1800s, Vienna was one of the centers of art, culture, and science around the world. It was the capital of the Austrian Empire, except there was a major problem. At the Vienna General Hospital, in the ward where physicians were being taught to be able to assist women in childbirth, the death rate of women in that ward was 10%. Let me repeat that. 1 in every 10 women who entered that ward to have a baby wound up dying of what was called childbed fever. Even back then, this was an astronomical number. Many women, rather than going into the hospital, would literally have their baby on the streets, on the steps of the hospital before going in. In 1847, the hospital hired a prominent physician by the name of Ignaz Semmelweis. Semmelweis' job was to reduce that death rate. He immersed himself in it, working from day to night for months, all the different aspects of what was going on within that organization. And after several months, he analyzed the data and he found, tragically, that the death rate actually, in his time there, got a little bit worse. Dejected, exhausted, he took a leave of absence. See, Semmelweis was smart. He was hardworking, but it wasn't enough to solve his organization's problem. Now, some of you may be thinking, what does the mid-1800s in Austria have to do with our world today? There are a lot of similarities. In the mid-1800s, Nikola Tesla was born, and he transformed how our cities and homes are powered. Today, Tesla automobiles are transforming how transportation is powered. In the mid-1800s in Austria, Sigmund Freud was born, and he transformed how people think about mental illness and treat mental illness. Today, we have magnetic resonance imaging, and MRI is transforming how we understand the chemistry in the mind to be able to even better treat mental illness. In his later years, in the early 1800s, Beethoven composed in Vienna, revolutionizing music composition. Today, we have Justin Bieber with 87 million followers on Facebook. Okay, Beethoven, Bieber, maybe we still have some evolution to do in our society today. Now let me bring back Semmelweis. After he came back, he's implemented a change. Now at the time, bacteria and microorganisms, they had been discovered and observed, but the relationship between bacteria, viruses, and disease had not been established. At that time, in the 1840s, there were publications about the production and the use of chlorinating lime. Chlorinating lime is similar to the agents we use for bleaching, like bleach, and it was commonly used as a bleaching agent, starting to be used as a bleaching agent at that time. Now, bleaching agents also are fabulous disinfectants. The change implemented by Semmelweis in that ward was he required all the doctors to wash their hands with chlorinating lime before examining women and before assisting them in childbirth. And the death rate dropped from 1 in 10 to about 3 in 100 very quickly. And 3 in 100 was about the mortality rate at that time. So you see, it wasn't just about being smart and being hardworking. He had to look outside his organization to bring in a technology to be able to help solve the problem and improve what was going on. So the question you may be thinking is, well, what are the type of things we should be looking at to be able to help our organization grow? So first, I'd like to thank Steve Fleming and the whole Alpine team for having me here to be able to address some of these issues. But before we focus on the business issues, I want to focus on something even more important, and that is on life, and on your life, and my life, and those around us. Each of you received an ACE evaluation form. And ACE stands for, the A is for how you attract and onboard customers, the C is the culture of the organization, and E is efficiency of the organization. But when you go to that form, the first section focuses on long-term goals for your life. Now, when terminally ill patients were interviewed and asked what was their biggest regret in life. One of the top regrets they communicated was that they wished they had invested more time in the relationship with their family and their friends. Another regret that the terminally ill expressed was they wished that they'd communicated more of their emotions to those people in their circle. Now, I'm certain that did not mean they wish they yelled at more people. I'm pretty sure that it meant they wish they expressed positive emotions and how important those people were to them. We don't want to have a life with regrets. So my recommendation is that you clarify what your long-term goal is for your family, your friends, and your relationships in 10 years or in 20 years. And for some of the younger people listening, 30 and 40 years. And what I'd like to suggest is take a long weekend away when next time you take vacation with your spouse, significant other, or a couple close friends, and dedicate that weekend to creating a vision and to brainstorming and coming with ideas of what you want your life to look like 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. And then making sure that that's documented. The next item on the ACE evaluation form focuses on your physical health. Now, I'm not going to bring up any current presidential politics because it just gets people mad in the US and probably other parts of the world too. So I'm going to go back to a time that I was super busy with my career. I had young children, demanding job, really difficult commute. And I remember seeing videos of then President George W. Bush mountain biking. He looked pretty good. And then I read that he was actually did that regularly, as well as he also exercised regularly in the White House. And I thought, hold it a second. If the President of the United States has time to exercise, how come I don't? If the President of the United States, with all the burdens that role has on that individual, has time to exercise, why don't I? And I realized that when I thought that and I said those words, I actually used the incorrect word. It wasn't that the president or really busy people have the time, they take the time. They take the time and block time so that they invest in their physical health. So as you look at your long-term life goals for your family, friends, and relationships, it's important that you also identify how you want to be physically in those times, because you don't want to get to those points and go through the process of your life and not being able to physically do the things you want to do or intellectually do the things that you want to do. The next goal on the ACE evaluation form is about your spiritual goal. Now, whenever I bring up spiritual goal, I think I get people nervous that this is a religious thing. And in an audience as large as those listening in today, they're Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindu, agnostics, atheists, and maybe even other sects. But no matter what your religious beliefs are, spiritually, as human beings, we all have a spiritual component of us. And I encourage you to set a spiritual goal. Now, 2 years ago today, I was actually hiking the Camino de Santiago in Spain, from the southeastern tip of France to southern Spain. It's about a 500-mile hike. And for a long time, I was hiking and talking with a gentleman who became a friend. His name was Travis. And I told him my challenge. I said, it's easy for me to set goals for what I want to do from a physical standpoint. I'm hiking 15 miles a day with a pack. Easy to measure. From an intellectual goal, I'm learning Spanish and I'm working on that. It's easy for me to measure. Where I'm really struggling is, how do I measure a spiritual goal? How do I set and measure a spiritual goal? And Travis told me two things. He said, Tom, your calendar is a spiritual document. Your budget is a spiritual document. My budget's a spiritual document? I don't want to say that in front of any of the accountants or CPAs I've known, because I could see it right now. They'll be like, I told you, Tom, budgets are spiritual documents. Budgets are spiritual documents. Like, oh, okay, easy does it. You have to admit that was a pretty good imitation of accountants talking about budgets, right? So it isn't enough to be smart and to be hardworking. In addition, you have to have long-term goals for your family and your relationships, long-term goals for your health, long-term goals for your spiritual self, so that you could be working on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to ultimately achieve those goals. The next item on the ACE evaluation form starts focusing more on the business. And the business or your profession, if you're working within the business, should align with what your long-term goals are for your life. Now, we start that area, and the way these ACE forms are set up is it gives a criteria, and then there's a priority score. Sometimes it's been filled in, other times you have to fill it in for your organization. Now, a 10 priority means this is really an important criteria. A 1 means this really isn't relevant for our organization. Then there's an evaluation section where you evaluate your department or your company and how good are you at that goal. If you have a high priority goal, a 10, and you only have a self-evaluation of a 5, you're identifying gaps. So when it comes to working on your business, you want to look at where are those gaps, because if it's important and you're not doing a super great job at it, that's an area to be able to focus your attention. Now, there are a number of goals there, number of criteria, but I'm going to focus on really one concept, and that concept is why your organization exists. Why your organization exists. Now, on the form, it shows Simon Sinek's name and Start With Why. Simon Sinek authored the book, Start With Why. If you don't have time for the book, then there's some terrific TED Talks he's done. There's a short one, like a 6 to 8 minute one, and then a 16, 18 minute one that you could watch on YouTube. Now, the gist of Simon Sinek's focus on starting with why is the better an organization always communicates why they exist first, then how they do things, and then what they do, the more attractive that company is for people to become customers and to stay customers over time. The better you communicate why you exist, the better you can attract and retain customers. Now, some of you may be thinking, really? Really, you think that people are going to make those kind of decisions just based on why we exist? That seems kind of soft and fluffy to me. Well, keep in mind that the 2017 Nobel Prize in Economics was awarded to Dr. Richard Thaler. Thaler did a lot of work, but the gist and the take-home message for me is he's the one that showed that people make financial decisions for irrational reasons. They make financial results for irrational reasons, but they justify those financial results for rational reasons. Now, if you don't think you do it, it happens all the time. Think about it. Okay, so here's my story. For 13 years, I had a Subaru Forester. It was a great car for the kids, growing up, great in the snow here in Colorado. And I saved my money, and 2 years ago, I bought a Tesla. Now, Tesla is terrific for the environment. It helps prevent unnecessary use of energy, reduces the potential for global warming, and it's really the right thing to do for the planet. Good rational reason, huh? Okay. The real reason I bought the Tesla is they're beautifully designed, they're so cool, fun to drive, and man, are they fast. Irrational financial decision, rational reason. Now, they happen to be fabulous vehicles, so I'm really happy with it, by the way. So starting with why is particularly important. Now, the question you may be asking is, okay, why does our organization exist? Why does this industry exist? So let me try to probe that question with another question. From an evolution standpoint, which is more advanced, human beings or bacteria? Which is more evolutionarily advanced, human beings or bacteria? Now, some of you think, well, maybe this is a trick question. Clearly, it's humans. We got things like cars and airplanes and microchips, and bacteria don't have any of that cool stuff. Clearly, we're evolutionarily more advanced. Well, let me tell you a little more about bacteria. Bacteria, many bacteria have amazing properties. Bacteria could be floating around water and it has one physiology, but when it contacts a surface, that entire physiology of the bacteria could change. And by a change in physiology, I'm talking about a complete transformation, like a caterpillar to a butterfly type of transformation. Once it's on the surface and attaches to the surface, it could start creating a biofilm. Now, a biofilm is a scientific word for it. I think normal people call it things like slime and scum. But if you've ever been to any body of water and you touched a rock, that's an example of a biofilm. When you go to the dentist and they remove tartar from your teeth, again, a biofilm. And if you look in the back of your trucks, you probably see plenty of biofilm there too. It starts creating this biofilm, and it's essentially building this condominium complex where other microorganisms could live. But it's also kind of like a fortress, because if there's ever an attack on the biofilm, a predator comes and eats some, or the conditions become bad for life, or the stream goes down, now it's exposed to sunlight and dry, and the biofilm dies back, the bacteria that are in the lower part of that biofilm are protected, and they could survive. And when the conditions get a little more attractive for life, they could start growing that biofilm again. Now, as that biofilm grows and gets more populated, the bacteria can send signals to the biofilm to break a piece off. So if there's not enough nutrients, or it's just getting really crowded and getting really big, they send chemical signals that could break a piece of the biofilm off that could float, attach in another location, and start a biofilm growing from that location. It's kind of like, from human terms, like people leave the big city and they form a suburban town. Now, the biofilm has another amazing property, and the property is that it essentially is a vascular system. And by vascular system, I mean kind of like our body, where we have arteries and veins that transport nutrients and transport waste out of our body to our liver, etc. Well, this vascular network allows nutrients to come in to feed and nurture the population in that civilization in the biofilm, and then for the waste to be removed. It allows nutrients to come in, but it allows the waste to be removed. And the waste being removed is fundamental to the survival of that civilization. The removal of waste is fundamental to the survival of civilization, whether that civilization be humans or whether it be bacteria. That is the amazing thing that your industry and your company does for this industry. Now, circling back to the question of which is more evolutionarily advanced, there may not be really a right answer to that, but just keep in mind that bacteria are able to build these condominium complexes, these fortresses, and they don't have an architect, they don't have an engineer, they don't have a general contractor, they don't have a realtor, they don't have a lawyer, they don't have a mortgage. I'm just saying, they got some stuff together. The next item on the ACE evaluation form is on culture, but I'm going to put culture last. I'm going to come back to that, but I'm going to focus on the E part, which is on efficiency. Excuse me. Now, first off, from an efficiency standpoint, congratulations, you're here. Many of the features available through Alpine's RAMS Pro software helps you with your organizational efficiency. So some of you are already customers at the highest level, others are looking to upgrade into the most current level, others are looking at this on its own, and 2 thumbs up, good job. And you're almost like Semmelweis looking for his chlorinating lime to be able to make your organization better. And after all, being smart, being hardworking aren't the key. Sometimes you have to look to the outside to bring in things to make your organization more successful. Now, in the area of efficiency, there are again a number of criteria, but I'm going to focus on one, and that one is on a bottleneck. Now, bottleneck is defined as the single location in a process that limits throughput through the process. A bottleneck is the single location in a process that limits throughput through the process. Now, many people, when they talk about bottlenecks, they talk about plural bottlenecks, but the reality is, by definition, there's always one bottleneck. But here's what typically happens, why people kind of refer to it as plural. When you have a bottleneck and you increase capacity through that bottleneck, then somewhere before that location or after that location, there's probably now a bottleneck, because now that's the limiting location for the whole process, either before or after. So it isn't that there are many bottlenecks, it's that when one bottleneck is solved and throughput is increased, the bottleneck shifts, either shifts earlier in the process or shifts later in the process. So when it comes to efficiency of the organization, it's important that all components of whatever the process you're looking at focus on making them more efficient. So if we're talking about a general process, a big one, a macroscopic one, where you say, we get an order, we have a new customer, we fulfill and create value for them, and then we get paid and we get money in the bank. Focusing on efficiency in that entire process is important. But leadership should pay particular attention and have particular focus on the bottleneck. Find the bottleneck, identify potential solutions for the bottleneck, implement those solutions, and see how effective you've been at increasing the bottleneck. If you document those, then in time, when the world has an impact on your business in some way, or other areas have now expanded, that area may become a bottleneck again. But you've already identified how you find it and what you do about it, so you could implement change more quickly. So bottleneck is really the key. Now, let me give you 3 examples of what are typical bottlenecks at different parts of the process, just so that to help you start thinking about where they could be in your organization. If you think of the process of you have an order to ultimately have money in the bank, at the end part, there are many companies, many organizations that run into cash flow issues because they have a receivables issue. They've done the work, they've borne the expense, they've created the value, but they haven't gotten paid. And over the last 10 to 20 years, industries have completely transformed to be able to eliminate that bottleneck. And this has happened in your industry, but it's happened in many others, where people have gone to a recurring revenue model, where people just pay a certain amount every month that comes directly out of their bank account or directly out of a credit card. And then you don't have to worry so much about long-term receivables. It's happened in insurance, it's happened in software, it's happened in things like Netflix, it's happened in even medicine, and it's also happening with government and taxation. So that's an example of a bottleneck at this part and the solution for that. An area we're hearing about in the news almost every day is a bottleneck that's occurring in the value creation part of the process. We're hearing about car companies not being able to build enough cars because they can't get enough microchips. That's an example of a bottleneck in the beginning. Now, should that company be focused on improving plant capacity and plant efficiency and their sales? Yeah, but until they solve the microchip problem, it's going to limit throughput to the end result that they're trying to achieve. On the early part of the process, you're hearing examples of bottleneck again in the news all the time. And that's focused on what you're hearing relative to things that occurred as a result of COVID and the pandemic. Think about cruise lines, airlines, and hotels. They got tremendous capacity to be able to serve clients. They just don't have the clients to be able to serve them. So you're seeing now a lot of focus from those industries on trying to attract people back into travel, because that's where the bottleneck is in the early part of the process. So it isn't just about being smart, being hardworking. When you're looking at improving efficiency, work throughout the process, but focus effort on bottlenecks. The next area on the ACE evaluation form is relative to culture. Now, from a cultural standpoint, you're very fortunate. Anyone in business is very fortunate because there's been massive amounts of research done on this topic by a tremendous organization, by the Gallup organization. And what they found is there are 12 key factors that if you're good at those, you're going to have employee engagement, you're going to have employee retention. And retaining employees is a good thing, and having them engaged in your organization is a terrific thing. Now, out of those 12 that you can set your evaluations for, I've already assigned the priority scores to those, and 2 of them get a 10. And I'm going to focus on those 2. And when you go back and you do your evaluations, you look at the other ones. But the 2 that have 10s are the most important. And those are letting people know what's expected of them and giving them the tools they need to do what is expected of them. Now, most companies are a lot better at letting people know what's expected of them. You're supposed to go to this many households and pick up trash. You're supposed to have accurate accounts receivable. You're supposed to meet certain profitability goals, etc. Where companies are usually struggle more, from my experience, and for me personally has been harder, is giving people the tools they need to do what's expected of them. Now, earlier in my career, when I had a larger organization that I ran, I received a scathing letter from a customer who's deciding to fire us. And that letter said what an awful job my team did and what a complete incompetent fool the CEO was. Me. And I'm a CEO, so I'm not supposed to have feelings, but it did hurt my feelings. But one of my mentors told me this, and this is really important. He said, "Tom, you've just been given a tremendous gift." And I thought, I've been given a tremendous gift? That's what you think? You apparently don't get very good gifts. You must get like a lot of coal in the stocking or like socks for Christmas or something. This doesn't seem like a gift to me. But he went on to explain. He said, that customer could have just left, and then you would have known nothing. You just would have lost that sale. But because they communicated, they cared enough at some point in your organization to communicate to you what the frustration was. So the gift could have been one of two things, or maybe both. One, it could have been pointing to a bottleneck in our organization, or it could have been pointing to a gap between a priority and how good we were at it. And the better we know that, the better off we'll be, because it gives us a chance to improve. Rudyard Kipling wrote a great poem called If, about becoming an adult and what it takes to get to that point. And one of the lines is, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowances for their doubting too. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowances for their doubting too. And when you receive negative feedback, whether it's from a customer or whether it's a frustration communicated to you by your employees, that's a chance to be able to create improvement in your organization. So one of the things that you could do is through this Q12, these 12 questions on the evaluation, you could use that as a survey with employees to be able to get input to potentially find gaps in your organization on things you could do better, to have employees that are better engaged because they have the tools they need to do what's expected of them, and also have better retention. Because it isn't just about being smart and being hardworking. That's not enough for success. For success in life, you have to have long-term goals so that you know what you're working to and that your professional career aligns with those long-term goals. It's important that you communicate effectively why you exist as an organization so that you become more attractive for people to be able to become customers and stay as customers. It's important that you have an efficient process and you focus on efficiency and put extra effort in identifying and removing and improving bottlenecks. It's important that you have a culture that you not only let people know what's expected of them, but you give them the tools they need, and you're creative to give them the tools they need to be successful. And if you do those things, then, well, you're going to have a much more fulfilling life, and you're going to have a much more successful professional career and business. And with that, I'm going to turn control back to your host and my friend, Steve Fleming. Steve, back to you.
All right, Tom, thank you very much for that. That was a real encouraging talk. And
thank you.
As always, you're a source of wisdom to all those around you. And I know it was a real good message for everyone here. And also, you mentioned earlier about the ACE form. For those of you who received it this last weekend, we certainly encourage you to fill it out. Our group of leaders in our corporate group ended up doing that together, and we got a composite score. So if you too, all of you fill it out, I'll have an online survey available to you. I'll send that link to you. Please fill it out. And what I'll do is I'll give you a composite score so you can kind of compare yourself against others in the industry. So that will be following the seminar. You'll receive that email and that link to the Survey Monkey, and certainly invite you to do that. But it will certainly augment your training on what happened today with Tom's message, and I think it'll help encourage you in your business as it grows. Now to move on to some other things. So at the beginning, I asked y'all to go ahead and send me any questions you may have. We have about 10, 15 minutes for questions, and I went ahead and have a few questions here. If you have any more, of course, send them to me and I'll make sure they get answered. So Tom, you open for some questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, go for it.
All right, let's go. Let's drill down into this then. Okay, here's the first question I received. It said, your perspective on bottlenecks and the urgency needed to remove those inhibitors is fascinating. Can you give some more examples of when you've seen those bottlenecks identified, when you got rid of them, and the results of that change to the organization? That's a good question.
Sure. Yeah, very good question. Good. Someone was paying attention. That's nice to see. All right. So So bottlenecks where a change was implemented to be able, and what was the consequence for that? One of my past careers, I worked very closely with the service industry and the pool and spa industry. So it's a different industry, but similar that you're visiting houses all the time. And what happened with some of our customers is they're like, well, we got to grow our business. So they started bombarding a pretty broad geographic region with promotional things about sign up for pool service with us. And what happened was it got them a lot of customers, but the customers were pretty far spread out. And as a result, that when they were trying to service those, they were spending a lot of windshield time. And by windshield time, I mean they're driving from one house to the other and they're not actually providing service. So they're wasting all that time in traffic and at lights going from one place to another. So in a way, one effort early in the process, promotion and marketing, created the bottleneck in the other part of the location where they're actually not able to deliver the service in those areas efficiently and profitably. So the change they made to be able to address that bottleneck is that when they looked at their marketing and promotional program, they targeted very small regions. Now, to the people listening in, I don't know what a small region means to you, but if you're going to try to expand to another town and you send promotional things all over that town, then you take the risk that you're going to get customers all over the place, and that's not good. If you target a neighborhood, you can be much more profitable being all in one neighborhood. And if you can win in one neighborhood, you use that same approach to go to the next neighborhood. Now, the definition of a neighborhood may be different. It may be this subdivision. It may be a zip code. And if you have a certain market share, a low market share in a certain zip code, then when you select how you're going to promote, whether it's through mail, whether it's through the people in the truck sticking things in mailboxes, whether it's choosing AdWords through one of the social media platforms, you can target those into specific zip codes, and then you're not paying for AdWords in an area where you don't want the business yet. If you have a certain percentage of customers or a certain market penetration you're looking for in a specific region, well, once you know how to get it in one region, then you apply those same rules to the next region. Once you knock off this zip code and you're at the level you want to be, then you go to the next zip code, you go to the next zip code. So in time, you'll wind up hitting that broad geographic region. You just do it more wisely, one step at a time, so that when you get the business, you're actually making sure it's profitable and you're not wasting time driving all over the place. Yeah. So that's one example.
And particularly with fuel costs, you just can't go spreading yourself too thin. So certainly you got to cover your costs plus get some profitability out of it.
Yeah, and I think, Steve, you mentioned to me that because of COVID, a lot more people are home. They're probably generating more trash, and you may have more runs going back to the dump to empty the truck to be able to come back. Well, like if it were me, I'd want to dominate those regions near the dump. Mm-hmm. Get the biggest market share in that region because you're going to also reduce transportation. Now, like I live in a neighborhood with a homeowners association. And like with every homeowner association, they have their pros and cons. But one of the pros is they negotiated a deal with a waste management company that we all have the same one. And it just, the billing goes right through our homeowners association. We pay it twice a year. And now when the trucks are in here, it's just super efficient. They just boom, 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 because they're doing every single house. So I don't know if that's applicable for you guys,
It is. It is.
but and it's beautiful for a neighborhood too, because people put their trash out Monday morning and they pick it up Monday afternoon. You don't have cans lying out, or you don't have birds ripping garbage bags apart and, just throwing trash all over the place, that kind of thing. And we have bears. We're in Colorado, so it's better to put it out in the morning, take it in at night.
Yeah. All right. Fantastic. Okay. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. Ready to go on number 2?
Well, I have another example.
Oh,
now that I'm
good.
thinking
Let's do
about
it.
it.
We've got
Would you like to
time.
hear that? All right. So the other example is, and I have a friend, and actually Steve and I have a friend where their business focuses on skilled craftsmen, where skilled craftsmen are actually manufacturing the product, and then that's being sent off to the customer. And there's enough customization that it's a manual type task. And they ran into the bottleneck that, well, we only have so many skilled craftsmen and we have so many orders, and now we're causing delays, and now the customer isn't happy because they're not getting the stuff that they want, that they're paying for, as quickly as they like. And when that company analyzed the work patterns of that skilled craftsman, what they found was the skilled craftsman was going, getting all the raw materials that they had to work to be able to build the thing they were building. And then when they were done with it, they had to take the piece of equipment over to like the shipping area and make sure that it went out, and then go find a new job and gather up everything. So the approach that they took was that they hired less skilled craftsmen, future skilled craftsmen, and they let those future skilled craftsmen look at what's the work that has to be done on the next shift. Let's get all the raw materials in place. Let's make sure we take the things out of inventory so that if we run out of something, we're reordering that appropriately. And we're bringing all that stuff and having it staged where the skilled craftsmen could do their work. And that future skilled craftsman could then also, the skilled craftsman say, well, why don't you work on this part? And they could kind of mentor them and oversee and make sure that they're doing a good job. And then when it's done, the less skilled the future skilled craftsman takes all that stuff to the shipping area. And then, while this is all going on, they have the next job ready. So that bottleneck, that individual that's a skilled craftsman, is doing the skilled craftsman work all day long. And they have someone that's a lower paid person doing the other aspect. So, I'm not an expert in your industry, but if you have, when you're looking at recruiting, if you recruit people and give them the opportunity to take on a more skilled job, and I don't know if, these big, strong dudes that are hauling trash buckets around behind and throwing it in the back of the truck, if at the same time, if they're good employees, if they're trained to get their commercial operator license, then they can move into that role if there's a gap and they need to fill that in. So building a pipeline of less skilled people that can ultimately have a career path to go into a higher paid, more skilled position is another way to be able to make sure that you're minimizing the potential for a bottleneck if a driver's sick or a driver's out or a driver leaves the organization. Right? Have a bench, find a way to have a bench, and it gives it reduces the likelihood that your bottleneck shrinks, which is bad, but it also gives people career opportunities to move up and get paid more and take on more responsibility and be better employees.
Fantastic. Great example, by the way. Okay.
Good. Sure.
Ready to move on?
Yeah, let's do another
That was
question.
too easy. So let's
Too easy, yeah.
make it a little more difficult. Let's
Okay.
do that.
All right.
Okay, here's another question. I'm going to rephrase this in kind of my words, so that way we could, get the specifics out to you. But in speaking about a successful organization, it seems like what you're saying is that the success of that organization lies at the feet of everybody, not just the leaders. Most of the people that are attending our annual seminar they range from customer support specialists all the way to business owners. We have some city support people, and we have people that are also directors of divisions there. We have some truck drivers, we have some dispatchers. So we have this whole host of different group of people. So the question would be, what is kind of the common thread as far as an application that could be applied across all of those sectors of people that are attending?
Okay.
I know that's a broad question, but I think it's good. I mean, it's hard in the speech to apply it just to one group, but we've got a lot of group of people, different groups of people here. So what do you think?
Yeah. There may be maybe slightly different answer depending on the group, but there's some things that are commonality, I think, for everyone within the organization, within any organization. So I spent part of the talk talking about the reinforcement about attracting customers and onboarding customers by reinforcing your why as an organization. And I gave the story about bacteria and how the removal of waste is a fundamental need for any civilization, bacteria, humans, anywhere else, and especially in a world that we live in that's getting so populated. So the removal of waste is critical. I think that, well, I won't speak about your specific industry, but I'll talk a little bit about when I worked in the pool and spa industry. When I asked people why their business existed and why this industry existed, I'd get answers like, well, we sell pool equipment. Oh, boring. Like, all the pool equipment. If you have a friend that's in the pool equipment business, don't let them see this part of the seminar, okay? Or we sell pool chemicals. Well, you know what? I've never met a human being on this planet who says, gosh, I can't wait to go to the pool chemical store and buy pool chemicals. Like, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
The reason people have a swimming pool, and a lot more have them because of COVID, and they can have time with family and friends. It's family and friend time. It's health time. And these are the two things people value most out of anything. So the parallel to this industry is that you are providing a fundamental need for society. And I think most people, when they go to work, they want to kind of feel like they're having an impact on the world in a positive way. And so the better you communicate that why you exist to the outside world and to your inside world, I think the more your business will resonate with people that they're really having a positive impact on the world. Now, when I was preparing for the talk, just to help solidify in my mind, I created an example of a why statement. So if you listen to Simon Sinek's TED Talk or you read the book, it's you start with a description of why you exist, then how you do things, and then what you do. And I didn't read it on the talk because I don't want to read it during the talk, but let me just read it to you now, just to give you an idea. And Steve, I'll make this available to you, and you could, if anyone wants it, they can have it, and they can mold it and make it better based on their needs. But so
and the YouTube videos out there as well. Simon Sinek,
right, YouTube,
great
right.
video.
Yeah, it's a terrific, good fundamental thing. So we believe that waste removal is fundamental for a sanitary and healthy civilization. Why you exist. We make a difference by efficiently responding to dispatching changes in a safe, timely, and efficient manner with accurate billing, friendly customer service, effective external and internal communications.
Wow.
How you do things, right?
Mm-hmm.
We just happen to pick up your trash on a weekly basis, blah, blah, blah. Could we sign you up? Right? So the better that your taglines, you're right on the top of your website, your elevator speech, when anyone asks you, like, where do you work? You want those why words to come out first. And going back to the parallel situation in the pool and spa industry, you don't want, when you say, like, what do you do? Well, I clean pools. Now, to them, they help people live a happier, healthier life. I do that by, I happen to clean pools. Boom. 15 seconds and the person goes, oh, you help people live a happier, healthier life. That's terrific. Versus you clean pools, don't care.
Makes sense. So
take-home messages, certainly the better you reinforce the why. The other area within the talk about improving efficiency is profoundly important. Like anything you do to get a little bit better, from a self-serving standpoint, the better the organization is, the more efficient it is, the more secure your job and your career is. And the companies that haven't focused on efficiency are often former companies. And the better you do that, the more secure, the better there are opportunities for you internally in the organization, for the organization overall. There's often the I don't know, like, I'll show my age with all the Rocky movies, right? Rocky won the world championship as a struggling guy, and then after a couple series in, he became the lazy champion. Right during the good times, he wasn't working as hard and wound up getting beat up. Okay, it's during the good times that you really want to be preparing, but you also, because if a bad time comes, the organizations that are going to survive are the ones that have become most efficient. So being efficient and focusing on that during good and bad times is really important. And that's something that everyone in the organization could do, because there's no one in the organization that could do all the things the organization does to create value in society.
Fantastic. So we all have to take ownership in it, is the bottom line. Whatever little contribution you have, it is going to contribute to a more efficient organization, which in turn floats everybody's boat. So
right.
That was a summation of it. So you took 5 minutes to do it. I just did it in 10 seconds.
That's why you're a superstar, Steve.
Okay, whatever. All right, let's go. Can we go on to the third one? This is the last one I have. Anyway, so I haven't seen anybody putting any other questions since then. I don't know if it's because they want us to stop talking or not, but we're going to keep going. We're going to keep going. And this is a good one, because I think this resonates with me, and it's a question that I would ask. Balance is real difficult for everyone, but particularly when the workload increases on account of either a staff quitting, like you mentioned earlier, losing a driver when everybody has to drive at that point, or some emergency that requires kind of an all hands on deck. So what would you say to someone in the throes of that season where you tell them you need to have balance, but the fact is that it doesn't seem that's a possibility?
Yeah. Wow. That's a great practical, tough question. It's really, in a way, it's really two questions. Question number one is, what do you do to make sure you retain staff? Okay. And, we talked about two of the skills. And the second question really is, when you have the situation where it has to be all hands on deck, then like the sirens should be wailing and the spotlights going off, because it's like, guess what you've just found? You just found your bottleneck.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So the two questions are, what implementations do you have? What changes do you start implementing to be able to better retain staff? Now, granted, like we went through COVID. If someone has COVID and they can't be working, then you're going to have a shortfall. Well, what are you doing to prevent people from getting COVID? If people are quitting because they don't like working for your company anymore, or they're mad at someone, or they didn't get the tools they needed to get the job done, then solving that problem is one type of solution. And so let me spend a little time on both of those. That the criteria you have for employee retention engagement are Gallup's Q12, 12 questions. And honestly, it's probably pretty easy to pull those questions offline and to even do a survey with all your staff to try to find where are your gaps in your organization. If people don't feel like they're getting the tools they need to do their job, that's usually the number one reason they leave. And if you think about conversations you have with spouses and friends, I mean, just last week I'm talking to a friend. She's retired, but she wants to work part-time. She's like, now I told them I only want to work one Saturday a month, and I only want to work part-time. Well, guess what happened? Are you hearing me? Steve, I'm not hearing you for a second.
Yeah, I say, don't we all only want to work one Saturday a month?
Well, I mean, she's retired and like, okay, so this is like the dream. Okay. But she, now they have her 2 and they may have her for 3. Well, what's the risk? She may quit because they didn't give her the tools. They didn't hire enough staff to be able to take care of what's necessary, or they didn't retain the staff. So number one, if you do a survey with your people all throughout the organization on those Q12, you may be able to identify areas where you can improve. Okay. And when you do that, it's always better to have an outside party compile everything, because then people tend to be a little more honest, because they're like, well, if I send it to you, you'll know I'm complaining and you may not like that. So, go to your accounting firm or some other administrative organization, and they could compile it all, de-identify it, and give you your scores back. And the better you're at that, the less you're going to have that becoming a bottleneck where you lose a person. Now, on the all hands on deck where that's your bottleneck, then there's a process that every company goes through to hire people. They may not know what it is. If you ask them, they'd be like, well, we need someone. We put an ad here, we put an ad there. Or they may be a large organization. Well, we have an HR department that's, they're here to be able to make sure we recruit people in. Whatever your current process is, if you're running into a situation where your bottleneck is people, then leadership in the organization on next team meeting next week need to be getting together with the people who are responsible for recruiting and have the questions of how do we do this better? How do we give you the tools you need to get, instead of X employees, X plus Y employees, right? Instead of 10 a month or 1 a month, however many you're normally recruiting, we need to do more than that. What do we have to do to make that a success? And like the example of the craftsman that I gave, where they hired other people to do some of the more administrative, logistical work and let the craftsman do the craftsman. The question is, the people who do the recruiting, is there a way that, are they doing things that are inefficient that's not letting them to recruit enough people? And if that's the case, how do you resource and support them, give them the tools they need to be able to recruit more? How do you structure the organization so you have that future craftsman that could be moving up into that role, so that it's not everyone on deck? When this person can't be there, this person fills in. And we're going to be hiring for this position. And you just keep the funnel of people working. So to kind of sum that up, because you do such a good job making it short, Steve, that question of when you run into the all hands on deck and you just have to do it. Hey, sometimes you have to do it, but it's teaching you something very important about your organization and your processes. One, if that happens because people left the organization, then the Q12 and being better at those Q12 things is really important. If it's, well, we just don't have enough people and everyone has to go out and drive and do whatever is necessary, then the recruiting process is a process you want to be able to create efficiency, because that's what's creating your bottleneck. Steve, I didn't hear you just a second.
I appreciate that, Tom. And I also think too that I would go ahead and fill out the ACE form that we sent you. Fill that up with your team, because you're going to get some really good insight as far as how they view your organization, how they view leadership, how they view changes. Are they overworked? You hear those things when you provide it. I know that once we did that form, we ended up implementing on our 360s, which are evaluations. We implemented some of the questions off that form so we can get feedback about how other people view that employee. Are they supportive of the culture? Are they ones to take ownership? Do they act like they have the resources to do their job? We integrated that into the review process. And I think it highlights, again, what are the things that we think are important, the whys of the world. Those are all part of the review process now.
Yeah, Steve, that's a great point. Imagine this future for your organization. You find, through going through the ACE evaluation, that you find there's an issue. Well, guess what? If there's an issue, your team, they kind of know it, okay? And then you do something and make that problem go away. When you go to your team next and say, okay, now we want to solve this problem, you've built credibility that you're going to find problems, you're going to deal with them, and you're going to make it better.
Yeah.
And then people are like, wow, you're doing stuff for us, and you're making what we do. This may sound like a negative. Well, you're making what we do easier. Like, well, we don't want to make it like, if it's a hard job, it's a hard job. Well, if it helps them achieve the goals and the expectations you have for that person, help them. Help them do that. And if you do that, once you do it once and you do it twice, it starts creating a pattern and a culture of when we have an issue and we have a problem, we figure out a solution and we do that. Now, the better you document how you found that bottleneck, what were the options you considered and what you implemented and what were the results, the next time there's that problem, and this is a gift for the senior people, the business owners or the directors or the high level people. Once you worked with your team to come up with the solutions and they see it wins, guess what happens the next time that's a problem? You don't have to solve the problem. Your team knows how to solve the problem, and they can come to you and say, we're having that problem again, and this is what we're going to do. And you go, good job, get it done. And the organization's better as a result of that.
Tom, thank you for that. I appreciate the feedback that and the answers you've given to everybody. I still encourage everybody, fill out that ACE form. I'll send the link to you, and that way we can give you a composite score, because I think it really begins to get you thinking about your business differently. And that's kind of what we have to do. And Tom, thank you again. It's a real pleasure every time I get to hear you. I love it. I feel encouraged, and I'm ready to go out and do something different. And, you know, with the pandemic seemingly like it's winding down a little, I think people are getting more interested in making outreaching moves and doing things differently. And I think that's been one of the values that's kind of forced us to think differently. So I think this session did that very same thing. Not like I want to compare you to the pandemic, but as a change agent, change is good. So thank you, Tom. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. All right.
Thank
See you guys. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.